So we're going to be talking about female genital mutilation. The first thing I want to say is that despite efforts to see that, despite this video is going to be as raw as possible. So despite efforts to see that, despite all the work that has been done with regards to female genital mutilation, you find that it's still prevalent in many parts of the world, especially in Africa and Nigeria, where I'm speaking from. You find that it is strongly anchored in culture. It is strongly anchored in culture and really and tradition rather. Even though people like to ascribe it to religion, you find that if you look, the only type of circumcision that is mentioned is the type that is done for males, and this is why you find that the name was changed, because it used to be female circumcision and it moved to female genital mutilation, and now it is called female genital cutting. So whenever you hear female circumcision, people tend to like to compare it with the male version, and they are not in any way similar, because that for the female circumcision has no medical benefit. It has no benefit in any way, so there's no comparison. And then the mutilation, why it was changed to mutilation, was to make people see the impact, like how bad it was, with respect to the injury and damage to the female child or the girl child. And then it was now changed to cutting, so that we can reduce stigmatization to communities that practice this female genital cutting. So now the new name is female genital cutting. So like I was saying, you find that it is still being practiced despite all the effort that has gone in. Progress is slow, and it is really because you find that there's no federal law banning it in Nigeria. So you find that despite all the work that is done, it's still is prevalent here in Nigeria. And then it is recognized as a violation of human rights. There are several rights which I will mention, that it violates. So it is also it's something that has been passed on from generation to generation. Statistics from the WHO show that as much as 100 to 140 million girls in the world have undergone this practice. Raw video, so you're going to be hearing different types of noise from my house. So it is practiced in more than 28 countries in Africa. You have Nigeria, Egypt, Mali, Sudan, Eritrea. You have northern parts of Ghana. You find that up to 91.5 million girls and women aged 9 years and above have undergone this procedure in Africa. Up to 3 million girls in Africa alone are at risk of undergoing this practice in 1 year. So you have the highest prevalence found in countries like Somalia. And in Nigeria, statistics show that about 1/4 of all the women that are circumcised worldwide come from Nigeria. So it is widely practiced in Nigeria. And the national prevalence rate shows that about 41% of adult women have undergone this practice. So you can see that it is widely practiced. Now, it also, what it means, like what's the meaning of female genital mutilation? What is female genital cutting? So it is all procedures that involve the partial or total removal of the external genitalia or any injury to the female organ for non-medical reasons. So it has no medical benefits, even though you find that it has been medicalized in parts of the world, and we frown at that seriously. You find that it has no medical benefits in any way. So we have spoken about the fact that we are also going to speak about the fact that it is shrouded in secrecy. It is practiced all over Nigeria. You still have these alarming figures, but we don't see the persons that practice these things. It is shrouded in secrecy. It is shrouded in uncertainty, in confusion. Even though we constantly advocate against it, we try to make a case to see that it is stopped. We find that it is still happening. Now, we're not seeing the persons that it's happening, that is happening to. We're not seeing the persons that carry out these practices, but it is still happening every day, right? So in a lot of places, it is seen as a rite of passage into womanhood. It is seen as, as a practice that is done to preserve virginity and to prevent promiscuity. In my opinion, not in my opinion, it's a violation of human rights. It is one of the ways in which women are oppressed. It is a a form of gender-based violence. It is rooted in human rights violation, and this need to suppress women to make a decision for them, you know. To these women, a lot of these children who are circumcised do not even have a chance to give consent. Like, a decision is made on their behalf before they even know what life is about. So that's how deeply rooted in violence, gender-based violence it is. It has no relationship with religion, as much as a lot of persons try to associate it with that. So there are different types. There's type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, with varying amounts of, you know, cuts made to the external genitalia of the woman. I'll try not to go into that solely, because my main discussion, this is a topic that has been really, really flowed. My main discussion is on the role of, you know, the male gender, the role of men. Let me not say the male gender, the role of men in reducing this dangerous practice. So I've told us a violation of different rights: violation of the rights of the child, a violation of a person's right to health, violation of, you know, the right to be free from torture and cruelty, inhuman and degrading treatment. It's a violation of the right to life, especially when persons die from the consequences of this practice. Okay? It often occurs without informed consent and deprives the child of the, you know, the decision to do or not to do this practice. So the stakeholders are the grandmothers and mothers who have been brought up to believe that this practice is age-old, is important, is a part of life. You know, opinion leaders who feel that is their role, you know, their role is to continue to make sure that this thing that was passed to them, continues to be passed down from generation to generation. And then you have age groups who perpetuate it by saying, oh, if you've not done this, you're not a woman, you're not one of us. So these are all stakeholders. You also have the traditional birth attendants, or persons who carry out the act themselves. Most of these persons do not know anything about the anatomy of the female genitalia. So they perpetuate all these, you know, all these practices without even knowing anything about the genitalia and the extent of damage they are causing. They just know that they are doing what their mothers and their fathers taught them, you know. So let me talk about some of the consequences quickly. It has no health benefits for the girl child. You can have the immediate consequences being shock from pain, right? Bleeding, varying degrees of bleeding, infection, you know, trauma to the urinary tract, damage to the anus, chronic consequences like pelvic infections, you know, dysmenorrhea, sexual difficulties, you know, sexual dysfunction. You know, when it comes to the time for the woman to deliver and have children, things like prolonged labor, delayed labor, mental consequences include things like feeling of shame, guilt, trauma. You know, it impacts her sexual relationships, and the psychological trauma affects a woman for a lifetime, right? So, what is the role of men in conclusion? You know, we're in a male-dominated society, so in a lot of ways, men perpetuate this act, like in their role as fathers, husbands, you know, community and religious leaders. They play different roles. Some play a passive role by refusing to marry women who are not circumcised, or refusing to marry them, or refusing to have anything to do with them. They can play an active role by initiating the practice. They also believe that, you know, this practice was passed to them. So a lot of these men perpetuate it in their role as religious leaders, and then, you know, community leaders and all that. Their role as paternal grandfathers, fathers and all that. And then some of them give consent, you know, they give consent to their wives to carry out this practice. If a man says no, that this practice will not happen, it will not happen. Right? They've also been known to provide financial support. You know, we live in the reality of our country, Nigeria, today, is that there are still some women who do not have the wherewithal to even pay transport to take their children to the hospital. That's the reality of Nigeria today. And you find that in their providing financial and material support, men also play a role in perpetuating this. Right? That sometimes they are inaction. Sometimes they leave it to the women and they do not want to be bothered with what happens and how it happens. So in that way, they also perpetuate this act. So how can they also play the role of patriarchy, like I've mentioned, by making sure that this practice continues, you know, it goes on, you know. And also, now what is their role? Like, how can they end this practice? They can end it by, being advocates, joining the cause, taking a firm stand against the practice. This thing will not happen in my house. If you say it won't happen in your house, it won't happen in your house, right? Speaking up against this practice, educating yourself, because you find a lot of people don't even know what happens during this process. So educating themselves and speaking out against this practice, in that way they can also play a role. They can support women and girls in their community who are at risk of this practice being, these things being done to them. They can also work with community leaders to change the cultural beliefs that we have about these practices. There are a lot of NGOs and women groups working against to see that this practice is curbed. They can join them in fighting this, fighting this cause. They can get involved. The truth is, men sit at these tables, these policy-making tables. So they can also contribute in policy-making, advocacy efforts to ensure that the voices of women and the girl child is being heard. So let me conclude by saying it is time for us to work